often they will learn more from the questions we ask them than from us telling them those things, even if you know the answers and you could cut to the chase and just tell it to them, especially in discovery calls and those kinds of situations, and very often in coaching. When you know the answer, and just because you know the answer, leading your client to reflection and answering the question for themselves is going to get you faster to where you want to be with them than for you to just tell them. Hey, it's Samantha Hartley of the Profitable Joyful Consulting Podcast. This is season 13. We are talking about gifts and talents, skills and expertise. And today I want to talk about an underlying skill, which is the ability to ask powerful questions, questions that get amazing responses, both from you, from your clients, and just really anything. One of the things that's happening right now as I'm recording this podcast is that Chat GPT and AI are all the rage right now. We're about 5 weeks into the phenomenon, and at least in popular awareness. And one of the things that we all know is that the value of the prompt that you give to AI is, will make or break the results that you get. So if you're getting kind of a garbage or funky result, that's because you're not putting in a meaningful prompt. And it made me think about like what good answers we get from ourselves when we put in meaningful prompts to ourselves, such as like high quality questions. So this really comes back. Years ago, I worked with a coach and we had very short calls. They were like, I forget, like 15 minute like laser coaching sessions. And so I would always go into those like hyper prepared. And so I would come up with like, what's my question that I want to have answered? And every time I would come up with it, I would kind of answer it already. So I'd go ahead and ask and just get like an extra opinion on it. But as soon as I formulated the question, I answered it for myself. And it made me think of this quote, and I actually had to look it up, but it's from Solomon bin Gabirol. And the quote is, "A wise man's question contains half the answer." So how often have you experienced this when you formulate a question for yourself, and in the thinking of it, like in the formulation of a good question, you already have ideas popping up, and like sometimes you already answer your question. So the right questions can be so powerful for us. And I want you to use this. The idea of these questions, I want you to use it for yourself in your journaling, in your preparation for your day. I want you to use them with your clients. And in general, to me, the goal of all of this is to ask ever better questions because they can do amazing things. When you're having a sales conversation, asking the right questions can reveal a gap, and the person is like, oh, well, obviously you're the person to help me with this. You can do that in your marketing where you ask questions that reveal a need for your services. So today I've got a selection that are really about getting the best from yourself and from your day and from your clients. So the first one that I want to look at is from James Clear, and I read it in Atomic Habits, and then I reheard it recently on his interview with Tim Ferriss on the Tim Ferriss podcast. So he asked this question. And it reminded me, there's an anecdote from his book where he talks about the effective way to get smokers to quit smoking wasn't like these patches and like showing them diseased lungs, and like all of the things that people had tried to get them to quit smoking were not working and were not working sustainably. And what it really came down to was helping them find beliefs that were congruent with the kind of person they wanted to be and incongruent with who they were right now, right? So that's the bridge to change, is like, I want to become a different kind of person who doesn't have these bad habits. So his question is basically, what kind of person do I need to be in order to achieve my goals or get what I want? That to me is a core question. When you look at your goals for your business and your life, what kind of person do I need to be to achieve this? And I find it incredibly motivating. It definitely takes some thought, like what kind of person do I need to be? I fill in this blank, which is I'm the kind of person who. In the smoking example, James cites this research where by merely saying, I am a non-smoker, the former smokers created an identity. basically a new identity and a set of beliefs that went with that. So, what kind of person do I need to be in order to double my business, for example? Well, if what I want you to do is notice when I think about doubling my business, I get this like, I get this feeling of like, that sure sounds like a lot of work. I'm a person who works efficiently. There you go. I can nurture the idea of that identity. I noticed when I was on my fitness journey that I would go into places and I would see people buying food who did not look like my goal for myself. And so I began to affirm I'm a fit person. Um, and then what kind of things does a fit person do? And what kind of things does a fit person not do? Uh, if I want to work with a higher level of clients, like higher value engagements, longer term engagements, then what are the things that are in my way? And what kind of person do I need to be to do that? I'm a person who believes in my expertise. I have deep expertise in my field. I'm a person who is a trusted insider for her clients. So figure out what those beliefs are and brainstorm the ones that energize you. And then, I would keep those in front of myself all the time. The beliefs that I'm nurturing, I have a whole list of them, and I'm keeping them in front of myself and seeing when am I acting in alignment with them and when do I kind of veer off from them. Some of them are very aspirational, like I'm a tidy desk person. But some of them are things that are already true of me. I am fit. I'm committed to fitness. I'm a healthy person. I'm a positive person. I hang around with positive people. Those are things that we can nurture and have more of, and that they can help us on our way to our goals. So the second question that I want us to look at, and this is one that, man, it's among the hardest questions I ask myself every single day. A few seasons ago, we talked with Christopher Carrick, who works with my clients on self-sabotage. He's also my husband. And years ago, we began when I was just so overwhelmed with my work. He helped me to come up with like, what's my number one priority? Like, what's the one thing that needs to get done today? And then his idea is, well, since it's the number one priority, you do it first, right? So we would work on building the habit, which became a habit in my business the night before. Especially on Sundays, I'll do this for the week, but the night before, I will figure out what's tomorrow's number one priority, and then I do my best to do it first. Sometimes the day gets away from me, but that is the goal. What's your number one priority, and can you do it first? So it seems like a simple question to say, what's my number one priority? But a lot of things compete for that number one position. Years ago, I heard that at Google, they have all of these inventors, engineers, innovators, creative people working there, and they can only fund so many initiatives. And so the ideas that are competing there aren't like good ideas versus bad ideas. They're good ideas versus great ideas and versus like unicorn ideas, like absolutely unique in all the land. And that makes me think of my decision in terms of priorities a lot of days. It's not that I'm like, which of these things is the most important? It's like, which of the incredibly important things that need to be done am I going to designate as number one and do that one first? And that kind of segues me into the next question, which is a variation of that. And it comes from the book, The One Thing by Gary Keller. And he asks a question. So it's kind of a variation of the number one priority question. And I love this formulation of it, which is, what's the one thing that I could do that just by doing it would make everything else easier or unnecessary? So I like that question because it's like, by doing it, it seems like it's a single thing, but then you knock out multiple things when you do it. So what's the one thing I could do that simply by doing it, everything else would be either easier or completely unnecessary to do? So, for example, we all have a lot of content to create every week. I have a lot of content to create. And what I do, the one thing that I do is I create this podcast. And then from here, my team and I create all the other content that needs to go out that week from this piece of core content. So it makes everything else easier. And without it, I'd have to come up with a bunch of ideas for individual pieces of content. And by the way, this is how we do things for our clients as well. We help them come up with a pillar piece of content, either once a month or once a week, and then cascade that into the other content that they create. So that's one example. Another example is, let's say you have a program that is just a customer service nightmare because people have all these questions about it. So there's constant email back and forth with all these questions. So it's possible that you could do a frequently asked questions page or an instructional video that merely by having that, it would eliminate like 90% of the customer service questions you have. So it's really thinking in terms of like a pillar tactic. And one more example of this, because I have a lot of clients who struggle with this, is that they're working with clients for an entire year, but there's things that are crunchy all along over the course of the year, or it's kind of hard to get started. Um, Formalizing and codifying a wise and intentional onboarding process could make everything easier. So being intentional about the start of your work with a client, or helping your clients to be intentional about onboarding new employees or new team members, like that intentionality at the start of something, that's a one thing that can make everything else easier, and sometimes can make it unnecessary to have um, all of the firefighting that we do when things are not started properly. So I love that question, that one thing question. Um, One thing is really the one thing questions, and number one priority questions are related to this one. And I'm sure I've talked about this one in the past because this is so important to me at the beginning of anything, at the beginning of the year, the beginning of work with a client, at the beginning of a meeting, before filming this podcast. I always want to ask a question like, what's your intention? What's your number one intention? And I'll rephrase that of like, what's the one thing that at the end of this, if we could accomplish this, you'd be really satisfied. So when we begin, we always begin with the intention in mind. And if you start with that, then first of all, it's incredibly clarifying. Like a lot of times I'll ask that question and my client will surprise me with the answer because I'm like, oh, okay. Didn't realize that was like why we're having this conversation. So it really puts communication on the right page, but it also helps you to begin your day with intentionality, to begin a meeting with intentionality. When we are intentional, like things align, right? You can perform in alignment with that and in accordance with that. And if not, then we're accidental. The opposite of intentional to me is accidental. And then, yeah, you get what you get. And sometimes, hey, you get an adventure. Sometimes a thing can happen that's like a cool thing. But a lot of times it's, you just don't result in the thing that you wanted. So I do think that it really helps to be clear about your intention when you're starting something. And then I bookend that with, what's your takeaway? So many of my coaching calls, I will end that call by asking, what's your number one takeaway from today? Now, as a person, I can tell you, I find it really hard to answer that question. It requires us to go from the part of our brain that was like, hey, and just like receiving mode. And then we go into like processing mode. And certain things, it takes me a while to process. So when my coaches ask me that question, or when I'm in conversation with someone and they ask me that question back, I have to kind of like go back and retrieve that answer. So an important thing that I've been doing at the end of my day, and I have this as a calendar reminder for myself that I put in my little bullet journal at the end of the day. What were my takeaways from today? What did I learn? Sometimes I didn't learn it, but it was a takeaway. Like, I don't want to do that anymore. This didn't work. uh, or wonderful ahas, like things that I do want to remember. And my bullet journal then becomes a record of my intentions for the day at the start, and then my learnings or my takeaways. And if you will reflect on that as you go, like on a weekly basis, monthly basis, and then over the course of the year, then you're going to see what your own personal development has been. And as you track, and a lot of us are tracking towards certain goals, sometimes we're just tracking to our own evolution of ourselves as better people. I want to monitor what how things are going, and what I do learn and how I evolve. And that practice, the spiritual practice of reflection and visiting the takeaways that I have, especially relative to my intentions, uh, is proving to me really invaluable. And believe it or not, it is something that I'm getting better at. So the theme of this season is gifts and talents, and skills and expertise. And it can seem like, especially when you're not good at something in the beginning, and especially if you're not good at something in the beginning when you're older, you feel like, I'm probably not good at that. It's probably not something I can do. But I'm getting better at things that I've committed to doing. So I'm really much better at doing number one priorities. I'm really much better at being intentional about what I'm doing. I'm much better about asking good questions, right? So I've been doing those things for a long time, and I'm better at them. And I'm newer to takeaways. I've only been doing that for about a year. And so that crunchiness is going to get better and better and better as I go. And then we'll see what that turns into. So I'd love to hear about your experiences using any of these questions to get at your own inner wisdom, because we pull our genius out of ourselves, and to learn to know yourself better and to perform better. Then turn these questions into questions that you use with your clients. Like, what are the key questions that you go in with and that you ask your clients as you're working with them to be able to get powerful results from them? Often they will learn more from the questions we ask them than from us telling them those things, even if you know the answers and you could cut to the chase and just tell it to them. Especially in discovery calls and those kinds of situations, and very often in coaching. When you know the answer, and just because you know the answer, leading your client to reflection and answering the question for themselves is going to get you faster to where you want to be with them than for you to just tell them. Okay, that's obviously the benefit of coaching over consulting in those kinds of situations. And I think it's how we can get ever better results from ourselves as well. So, into which categories of the 10 drivers of success for successful consulting businesses do these questions fit in? Well, obviously, we've been talking about mindset. What are the beliefs I need to have, and how do I need to be in order to achieve what I want? That's mindset for success. Visioning is a big one here, because when we think about, like, what's my intention, what's my ideal outcome, what's my number one priority, a lot of this is a vision, not just a long-term vision, but what's my vision for the day, and what's my vision for this meeting? Like, what's the outcome that I want to have for the next hour? We can do visioning on a short-term basis. And it's also delivery. The way that we get efficient, effective results for our clients can be through asking powerful questions like these. So I look forward to hearing which of these questions has resonated with you, and how you're using questions like this with yourself and in your work. And with that, I'm wishing you a profitable and joyful consulting business. Thanks for watching. I'd appreciate if you'd like this episode, and if you enjoyed the show, why not subscribe? Be sure to click the bell to get notified when new episodes drop.